I'm Allison, Genealogy Services Manager. We don't typically introduce ourselves at the beginning, so I'm very happy to be here and be able to speak with you all. And Elizabeth, would you like to say hi?
Hello, my name is Elizabeth. I am one of the senior genealogy librarians. So happy to be here and chat with all of you.
So we can just start with a question that I have sitting on my desk that I was actually just trying to figure out. Heraldry. How many of you have ever seen one of these? This is, yep. So it's for the Carter family. And I actually was just looking at it going, okay, what Carter family? What Carter line? What is this even for? Typically, these are given to specific families and they don't necessarily pass down from generation to generation. So it's always very interesting when one of these comes across our desks. Have any of you seen any of these or had any for your family?
I know for my family, we have a bunch of these sweatshirts with the Hodges family crest. And, it was funny because as a kid, my dad's like, so we have these Hodges family crest things, but like our people were poor. So this is not our family, but we'll wear it because it's cool merch. Like,
I'm sharing my screen where I just did a search. I put Carter Family Crest just to see what would come up. And it looks like the Encyclopedia of Virginia actually has something, and it looks like it's the John Carter passed on to his son, Robert King Carter, and subsequent generations. So that is University of Virginia. So this is a slightly modified version, but it's very similar. So I would say this is essentially very similar to what I'm seeing on the screen.
yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. I was curious about that. It came across my desk and I wanted to know what the what it came from. So it looks like a lot of you do have, we have a crest, okay, coat of arms to an individual, yep. Uh, Davenport family crest. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of different options. So there you go. There's the first question of the day is what is
And now we
for?
have more.
Yay!
Yay.
See, we got started with that one question and I knew we would get going. So I'm going to stop my share and let's see what we got.
Now, as a reminder, I see some people trying to put some questions in the chat. Your questions will get buried with conversation. Please use the Q&A button for your questions, or we will not answer your questions.
Just because we don't
Thanks,
see them.
friends. Just because we don't see them, not because we don't like you. We love all of you. Okay, do you want to take the first one, Allison?
Are there records readily available from colonial days governance? Where would you have the best chance of finding Virginia colonial records, especially 1700s up to the Revolution, i.e. tax list census? I mean, the first place I would look is Family Search. I mean, when you're looking up anything new, so let's say this is a topic you haven't searched very often before, I like to always start with Family Search, and I like to go to the research wiki. Now, it's a juried wiki, so it's not going to be just some random stuff, but you can type in a location and do a search. So it's going to give us different pieces of information specific. But if we go to colonial records, that's probably going to be better. English colonial records, ancestry. Ooh, that's a lot of lists. That's a lot of resources. Oh, yeah, I've used this book, Cavaliers and
Mm-hmm.
Pioneers. I would highly recommend going through this list right here, Virginia colonial records, and seeing which one of these could be potentially helpful. And in fact, I'm going to copy
Also,
and paste that into the chat.
in our Pathfinder for Virginia, our website, there is a section for colonial and court records of just books.
That's a good one too. So if you go to our website, once it loads. We can go to genealogy services, and then we can go to search by state. So if I go in here, and then you can go to any specific state, so like Virginia, and then it's going to go by different topics. Now, just to make sure you guys know this, these state guides are the smallest little selection of materials that we have in our collection. A lot of people get confused when they walk in and think that we just have stuff for maybe Indiana or just small little pieces. We have a massive research library of materials that covers the entire United States and then some. So please, please, please look at this as inspiration. That's what these are. These are selective lists. It says so at the top. It is a selective list of books. So very, very small little glimpse into what we have. But we have census and tax lists that you can look at, church records, colonial and court records. So these are just inspiration of different materials you might find. Now, the biggest thing that I would suggest is if you're not local here and you can't come in to do the research, is look at these lists, take that title of whatever record that you're interested in. Well, let's see here. We could do Virginia in 1720 or Reconstructed Census. Do a highlight copy. And then you can put any of them into WorldCat and see where they are. There we go. And then it'll tell you where the closest copy is to you. So it knows I'm in Fort Wayne. I had already put in my zip code. So that's typically what that is. But what you'll want to do is then look at where there's different copies of it and the closest ones. And there's a lot of copies of this. 99 different libraries have copies of it. So there might be one near you. And you might also just try to do a Google search and see if it's been digitized. If it's been digitized, then you don't need to worry about trying to find it in a library. So start with a Google search, go to WorldCat, and hopefully you'll find lots of good options.
So the next question is one that a lot of people have to deal with, at least for one branch of the family. There's always the one, which is how do you research a common name? So for example, this person was saying that their surname is Cook. They're from Pennsylvania, like early Pennsylvania, but they can't find a path back to New England states. So there are ways of tackling it. It's not fun. I'd say cluster research. So when you find, say you find the right people on a census or a tax list, look at everybody on the page and see if you can find them with other people. Look for middle names. It's a matter of finding the right people that are the right age, that are in the right place.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would look in Percy. I would try to nail down more information about the last people you know for sure and seeing what other pieces of information they might have left behind or their children might have left behind. So I would dig in further to the ones that I knew for sure to try to trace back further.
You want to take the next one?
Ooh, okay. I have several ancestors for whom I haven't been able to find passenger records. Please share your best website recommendations for German and Irish passenger records for mid-19th century. Thanks. Oh, man. Okay, so
All of them.
yes.
All of them.
So there's so many different ways that you can go with this. The first thing that I would do is, even though you've probably already done ancestry searches, I would do a different type of ancestry search. I don't know how you've been using ancestry. I don't know what your familiarity is with it. Let me show you what I would do. And this may be old news to you, and you may be sitting there going, oh, great, I just saw something I've already done. But for some of you, you may not have done this before, so hopefully this will help a couple. So the first thing I do is get in there, and I go directly to the passenger lists. And that's the very first space I'm going to go in here. And I can even go drill down further to specific collections. So if I know for a fact that they came through New York, I can click on the New York ones. Or if it's Baltimore or Pennsylvania, if I know the port that they came in, that would help a lot. And then I'm going to do different types of searches and I'm going to get kind of confusing with it. So you could take a name. Let's say this person's name is, oh, let's see here.
Marguerite Moore.
Marguerite Moore, birth
Yeah.
year.
1846.
Okay.
You can guess what country she's from.
Yes. So this is how I would start the search. I would start it as a very general search, like I would if I was searching ancestry broadly. And then what I would do is start looking at the different results that come up and try to figure out if any of them are possibly correct. And you can see that there's different spellings of Margaret. I'm not even seeing Marguerite, Margaret
Yeah.
with two T's, etc. So I would look at this and say, okay, maybe it's the first name that's tripping me up. Maybe I want to say more is exact, the birth year is exact, and the location's exact. And I know that she arrived around what year?
1884. 84. Or no,
Okay.
82. Either 82 or 84.
Let's do 83, split the difference.
Yeah.
So that's truly what I do, is you pick a couple pieces that you know are correct and you exact them. And then what you start to do is pull back. There's a Lizzie. I don't think that's right though. There's Mary's. And you just keep pulling back until you start to find things that could potentially be it. Now, I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to take the birth date off because that's probably tripping us up. And we're going to exact the arrival date then. And you just play around with this and try to figure out, okay, what is the thing that's really tripping this up? Because sometimes it's just adding a couple of these exacts will get you the correct answer.
Also, sometimes, like, this is gonna sound real dumb. See how some of those on that list Allison was just showing had Mr.? Try searching Mrs. Margaret Moore, arrived 1884. And you might actually find it.
Yeah, there's Mrs. Moore, Mrs. Moore, Mrs.
Yeah.
Moore.
Yeah. So women don't have first names. Sometimes we are just our marital status, which is great. So basically, what Allison's getting at is be creative with
Yes.
your searches. There's never just like one website. Sometimes I've found things in like the ancestry passenger list record collection. Sometimes I found them on Family Search, even though they cover the same date range, because not every search algorithm is the same. They're often also indexed slightly differently as well.
So you also want to look at different passenger lists in
For
Family
different,
Search. So you mentioned Germany, you mentioned Ireland. So Germany, immigration. So this is something that you can start looking at. So this is going to talk about leaving and entering the United States. And this is very much US based, being completely honest, but that's right here. A lot of the other parts of these are very much international. So take a look and see what you can find in here. There's going to be some great suggestions. And then my best friend, you gotta Google. It's Google. Google's my best friend. You have to put a search in because if you're not finding what you're looking for and you're like, okay, I know they arrived in this time period, you can say, okay, so passenger lists 1847 New York City and see what some of the results are. See who is giving you ideas of where to go. and it may give you inspiration of somewhere else that you haven't even looked at.
Our friend Joanne says that there are references to two of our ancestors that were born in Brazil in 1844. But they were from Germany, like the family was from Germany. One of the questions was, is it possible in 1844 to get from Brazil to Germany in less than a month? And how can you find Brazilian birth certificates from 1844? I would assume they're Catholic, but I don't like to assume because you don't like to assume, but Brazil, Catholic. So maybe some Catholic Church records. And as far as getting that distance in less than a month, that seems a bit unlikely because it would take several weeks. Wouldn't you agree, Allison?
Yeah, it would. Less than
Well,
a
I
month.
mean, they mentioned
Kind
a
of,
baptismal record. It could be a delayed, like they didn't baptize the child immediately.
because we're talking about the 1800s, 1844. Like there's,
Now, somebody's referencing like the Nazi Germans that went to South America. This is obviously before the Nazis. We're talking 1844. So if y'all have friends for the like ideas for the 19th century, put them in the chat.
do we know where in Brazil?
No, it doesn't say.
Okay. November 28th. I mean, that would be cutting it close. I wonder if did they do baptism by proxy? I would have to look into that.
Send us an email, Joanne, and we can look into this a little more.
There's also civil registrations for
Yeah,
Brazil on Family Search, which is something I would want to look at, but you need to know the area.
yeah, yeah. If you know more information, send us an email and we can email back and forth about it and give you some ideas. Just know that the civil registrations for Brazil will be in what language? Portuguese, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that will be fun, but not impossible.
So yes, the answer is yes, there's stuff, but I will have to dig a little bit further.
Yeah, we'll talk more.
Trying to find information about my grandmother, Alina Hauser, who died in Tewksbury, Middlesex, Massachusetts. Upper class community. She was from Georgia. How can I find out why she was there?
What
Newspapers, maybe?
newspapers also like what was she working? Um, so what time frame is this? I
I
mean,
don't know. That's what
the
I'm gonna
person
look
who
at.
said that this was their grandmother.
I'm always curious and I like to look it up. So my go-to when somebody brings me a problem is to first go into Ancestry just to get an understanding of what I'm even looking at. Because Ancestry just scrapes the top, so it's real easy to pull stuff. Oh, interesting. If that's the same person, she's raising somebody else's kids. Nora Willie Ruth. That's in 20. And she ends up in Massachusetts in 29. Do we know what happened to the kids and the family?
So the person who asked the question said yes, Hauser, yes, in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is them. So what happened to this guy? Widowed in Ohio. Where did the children go? Where's he live? Okay. Honestly, I would start looking at Jimmy Hauser. Is this him? 1927? If this is her, she died in 1929 in Massachusetts. Did they separate? I would start looking for newspapers. I would start looking and seeing if there's any sort of documentation. I'd want to look in this area of the country, and then I'd also want to look at Massachusetts. Because she just kind of appears and dies. That's very odd. Elizabeth, any suggestions?
I'm actually looking at the next question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I saw that the next question was an early Irish thing, so that's why I was looking at it.
That is up your
Skipping
alley.
ahead.
I would 100% start looking for any sort of other documentation, city directories. I would look and see if there's any sort of divorce, separation, because it's
Yeah.
very odd that they. Oh, I like what somebody suggested about the Great Migration,
Yeah.
their life, and that is entirely possible. It's just interesting that they ended up in Ohio.
You never know.
And his sister's with them. And it looks like he's working for a steel mill at that point.
Yeah, Allison, I think you're right. Just like looking for just more documents. The more documents you have, like the better picture of the entire situation you can get. Yeah, I believe they were looking for work. She was in Massachusetts alone.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't think they were there the way
yeah.
that it looked.
Interesting.
So anyway,
Okay, cool.
I would just start pulling more. But I will let Elizabeth take the next question.
Okay, so the next question. Um, Mary said that Herbert Wall is a great-grandfather named John Coleman, who was born in 1856 in Ireland. Uh, they were Catholic, so born before Griffith's valuation, which is always miserable. He immigrated to the United States in 1879, according to the 1900 census. Next found in 1892 in a naturalization in Butte, Montana. No petition or declaration of intent found. He gets married in the United States in 1884. They can't find a marriage record for him. No draft registration for anything. No passport. It's too early for Social Security. No birth certificate or baptismal record for his son John, born in 1893 in Butte, Montana. Now, John, so the immigrant ancestor, he died in 1911 in Syracuse, New York. His wife, Bridget, also known as Cecilia Brophy, was born in 1861 in Ireland. She died in 1901 in Syracuse. No known siblings for either. Joseph was their only child. No diocese info in Montana or Syracuse. Oh my God. So I'm thinking, so Joseph, the son, we couldn't find any kind of baptismal record. Like there's no Catholic Church records out there in that time frame. I mean, there should be for New York. So this is where I would try looking at newspapers because okay, this sounds like kind of dumb, but I swear to God, it's not. In Montana, in that late 19th century time frame, the newspapers that are newspapers.com are gold because it talks about a lot of people who are going out there for work. Even the most basic stuff of like this person's getting married, this person had a kid. Sometimes it's relative is visiting, like kind of that kind of a thing. Dig through the newspapers in Montana. And I would also try contacting the Syracuse Public Library. They might have some additional ideas for you to dig through because there were a lot of Irish people who ended up in Syracuse. So you're going to want the Erie, Buffalo Public Library. Their librarian actually just gave a program for us not long ago. And we had a conversation before the program started about how much stuff they have on the Irish community in that area. So definitely take a look at that. I'm gonna put a link to their site in the chat. Yeah, okay, so Mary had visited the Helena diocese and spoke with the Syracuse diocese and no records that early. That's kind of wild that they wouldn't have records for that time frame. Yeah, Allison had asked what churches were there that early. That's a good question because if there weren't any Catholic churches out there, they were probably going to a different church. So see if there's something else you can get into. But yeah, definitely contact the library in New York and see what they suggest. Because like I said, they have a bunch of these different records and resources that are specific to that area that might help you. There were Catholic churches, which I contacted, but no information. Fascinating. Yeah, try the
No.
newspapers too.
If the diocese didn't have records going back that far, what was the history of that area? Like
Yeah.
what Catholic, the Catholic hierarchy is pretty much set in stone. So where were the records going?
Yeah.
Like I would follow the records. So it was probably not Syracuse.
Unless there was a fire, I highly doubt the Catholic Church would dispose of them. They're hoarders. They keep everything for the most part. So, unless there was a fire or some kind of other natural disaster that would destroy them, I can't envision them disposing of the records.
No, not at all. That's why I'm
Yeah.
looking at this going, I don't know. So I would work on, I would also look at the history of the other churches, even though there were Catholic churches there, I would see if maybe at some point, maybe some of the records got intermingled.
They were assuring her they didn't keep records back then. This isn't that early, though.
What?
I have so many questions, Mary. I see why you're frustrated.
I think you're talking to someone who doesn't know. They
Yeah,
either don't know or they don't want to find the records because that they should have the records. This isn't that early.
no,
And the Catholic
absolutely not.
Church doesn't just throw stuff out.
Archivist of Syracuse told me that, and I visited the Helena diocese. That just,
That's just odd to me.
yeah, that it's,
Does anybody else have experience with this?
yeah. Share in the
Audience,
chat.
join the conversation with this one because honestly, you're stumping us with that because that doesn't make sense.
I believe that they said that to you, but
Yeah, it just doesn't.
that doesn't compute. Do they have circuit priests? That might be a thing. But they had churches.
Yeah, but
Unless it was a visiting priest that moved on.
did they not have enough priests for the
Yeah, they still kept records. Could it be a UCC?
older North American church records kept by priests of the Order of the Holy Cross?
I know that the individual churches often won't have records, but the archdiocese or diocese offices should have them. Yeah, because they would have to turn them over. Another person had said to check the Episcopal and Lutheran churches.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't hurt to just check them just in case, because you never know. Maybe they didn't like the priest at the priests at the very churches near them. I mean, Episcopalian is Catholic light. I mean, Irish Catholics would have strong feelings about it, but even still, depending on where he's from in Ireland, it might not be that big of a thing.
The diocese is, I, I just, I'm a little stunned that they wouldn't keep stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one person, makes a really good point saying that, even when there are records, often they're rather poorly kept, disorganized, and bad physical shape, and they're searching for a great grandparent
Wait,
for the church. And well, the church doesn't have a lot of support, so doing that search is difficult.
hold on. Okay, so apparently the Diocese of Syracuse didn't exist until in 1886. So
So
prior to that, it
total,
was the Diocese of Albany.
try the Diocese of Albany.
So look at the history of the diocese. Sometimes they break off.
To make it fun for us.
So I would look at that.
And they should have told you that. Like, shame on them for not saying that.
So yeah, and that was in 1886. 1886 is when the Diocese of Syracuse was formed. So that means the Diocese of Albany probably has the records.
We are running out of time because y'all have some good questions, but they're gnarly questions. But this is why it's a brick wall program, because everyone's brick walls are nasty in some way. So we're going to move on to the next question, unless Allison, you have something else to add.
Uh, no, I just threw the link for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Albany. And also look at the history of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Albany, because who knows, maybe that was formed in 1882.
Well, and look at the history of the diocese in Butte too, because he was born
Yeah.
in Butte, but like it could be a similar situation. So do that. Um, wow. Okay. I'm gonna preface the next question by saying if we don't get to all of your questions, which we definitely won't because there are 36 in the queue, please
No.
send us an email. Our email is genealogy@acpl.info. I'm about to stick that in the chat. But yes, if we don't get to your question, please send us an email. Okay, Allison, do you want to take the next question?
Oh, this is one I had a question about. Okay, so I've been researching my great grandfather for over 20 years. I'm attempting to find the name of his father. He was from Richmond County, North Carolina. I've done some research on that. He lived in a small town. I've been at the courthouse in person. The records do not go back that far. I have researched his children with no luck. Others have attempted to link him with the James Hasty in Virginia, but no sources. Thanks. Okay, Barbara. My first question is, what's his actual name? Because I see James Hasty, so that's probably not the father. So I'm curious about who the person is. Woo! Bill Butcher just put the Montana missions in the chat, so that's actually pretty helpful. Thank you.
Yay, Bill.
See, this is why I adore you guys. You guys help. You crowdsource. This is perfect. Okay, so with Richmond County, I know Richmond County broke off into pieces. So there are some, you have to look at the history of the county. So one of the things that I will go to is,
There you go into that Newberry,
of course
the
I am,
yeah, the historical atlas of county boundaries.
Atlas of Historical County Boundaries. So we're looking at this. We're going to go to Virginia, and we are going to view individual county, and we're going to go down to Richmond. Okay, so here we go. All right, so Richmond was created from Anson, then lost to Robeson, gained from Robeson, changed between Montgomery. Okay, Richmond of Hooper was proposed but didn't happen. Scotland was formed from Richmond. So that's what we're looking at is we have a bunch of different things that are created out of there. So what I would recommend is looking in these other places as well. So you know that they're from a small town in Richmond County, Virginia, or not Virginia, North Carolina. What I would do is take a look at these different counties that it could be. So Robeson, Montgomery, and Scotland, and see if there's records in those locations. And I'm curious about the records not going back that far. Courthouse in person and the records. Okay. The other thing I would look at is going back to my trusty friend Family Search. I would hop in there and see what sort of records they have for the area. I like to go in the catalog specifically. And we're just going to go into North Carolina. Then I'll go to those online records and hit search. And you can then look through these specific records, but I also like to go to places within and play around with that as well. So we can go to Richmond and we can say, okay, what sort of court records do they have? and see how early we can get. It looks like they have some court records from the 1700s, etc. So hopefully this is kind of the information that could help you, but I would very much recommend going into Family Search and then searching for the counties that made up Richmond or broke off of Richmond.
Our grandfather and several siblings were born on Winchester Road in the Godfrey Reservation, Allen County, Indiana. Where can I find more information about that house, land, etc.? A lot of places. There are going to be plat maps that will show that area. There are a number of atlases that you can look at online that have plats that should show that area regarding like who owned that section of land. But why don't you send us an email and we can talk about more specific resources? But there are ways to do that kind of property research for that area of town. Yeah.
I would also look at the ACGSI website.
Yeah.
Because they do have some information on that. Let me pull this up really quick.
Somebody was asking while you're doing that about how to determine push and pull factors between places in a specific time period. So for example, like why would someone from Norfolk, Virginia move to Edgecombe County, North Carolina in the 1740s? That is when reading like secondary history, so research that has been written about the area, that is when it is important. You want to look at the wider historical context of these places. I would look at county histories for Edgecombe County, North Carolina, and see, why were people moving there to begin with? That's kind of where I would start.
So I'm gonna read this off and I don't know the answer. So I'm gonna ask for the crowd to jump in. Can you explain the significance of any of some recent changes regarding tree making in Family Tree and My Heritage? Is it just encouraging more people to pay to use features in My Heritage? My assumption would be yes, but I don't know the answer.
And when they say family tree, do they mean family tree DNA? Because they did away with the tree making feature in family tree DNA, and you have to use My Heritage. It's a weird partner. It's an interesting
Yeah.
partnership agreement that they now have. So I would assume yes. But why don't y'all discuss that in the chat? Because I'm not entirely sure all the specifics on that arrangement, but some of you might know a little bit more than we do on that particular topic. This person said that they have people born from around 1800 to 1820 who went to Missouri from Kentucky about 1840. They have no idea where in Kentucky, but going through tax records county by county in Kentucky feels impossible. Is there a more realistic path?
I wouldn't go through tax records county by county. I would look at the children first, see if they stated any place in Kentucky that their family's from.
Yeah.
I would look,
Look at all the kids. All
yeah,
of
I
them.
would pull those children apart and see what they have, what information they've inadvertently given. So I would look at the census records because you never know who's going to be listed. So you're going to be looking for that surname. And then that should zero in a county and then you can go out from there.
Somebody had asked a question about the North American family histories 1500 to 2000 in the Q&A. I'm going to share my screen because the person who asked this question was asking like, how do you cite the actual books? Okay, so this is just an example of one. If you click on source, you do get the title, but you're not getting the page number unless you're opening it. If it were me, if I was just to cite it as a regular book, so that way I could get as much of the copyright, like the publisher, where it was published, that kind of thing. Get the title page, essentially. That's where the goods are, and you can say in your citation that you got it from this database on Ancestry. That's how I would do that. So a number of people keep asking about the chat. If you would like a copy of the chat, you need to send us an email. This is a library policy, not something we can control. So please, if you would like a copy of the chat, send us an email. We're more than happy to send it to you. Our email is genealogy@acpl.info. Also, if you have more questions, because we are running way short on time, please send us an email with your questions.
Okay, so the next one, they have their DNA, their dad's DNA, autosomal and Y DNA, a pretty good tree built. I have conflicting family information from what shows up on Family Search. Wondering how I jump into verifying the tree information with DNA, need first steps for brick walls. So, very first thing I would do is start looking at the different matches that you have for those DNA tests and compare those with the people, compare the names with the names of the people in your matches trees. And you can kind of build out trees from there. And that's kind of what we do for adoptees or people that don't know a parent or a grandparent. You take the information that you have and that you know for certain, and then you compare it to what's other people are putting in their trees on DNA and kind of doing a compare and contrast and try to go from there. I would highly, highly, highly recommending going and um, doing any of our DNA classes, but also I would contact Sarah. Sarah is our in-house DNA expert, and I would recommend reaching out to her. So just shoot her an email to our general email address, and it's Sarah without an H. She will be happy to help you.
Would microfilm records of local newspapers typically be better quality than what is found on newspaper archives or newspapers.com? No. No.
Typically, they're direct images, so unfortunately, what you see is what you get. A lot of
Yeah.
times, the newspapers were printed so poorly that they just look horrible no matter what you do to it.
And sometimes it's like that they're filmed poorly too. So there's not much you can really do, unfortunately. Judith, where do I start to find my Irish great grandmother who came from Ireland? Send me an email with some information. I could give you some specifics because it depends on the time period, depends on what information you have. But I will say a lot of people who are trying to get back to Ireland, especially Ireland for some reason, they haven't done enough American research first to jump the pond because we're always really excited to jump the pond. So send us an email and with what information you have, and we can give you some suggestions.
Okay, so Beth is asking about a Revolutionary War era ancestor who is DAR approved patriot and then red flagged as presumed loyalist conviction and confiscated land, and can't find the information. Okay, so there's a lot more there. I'm summarizing for time. What I would recommend doing is actually reaching out to the DAR. So they're going to have the records as to why they were approved and also why they've been red flagged. They came across a record somewhere that had that information. So I would ask to see if you can get a hold of it. I presume that you probably know somebody in the DAR. If you don't, look up your local chapter. They're going to have some additional access, typically, the registrar will, as opposed to what you have access to. So see if you can reach out to them, see if there's information that they have that can help clear this up. I think there would be more information in the red flagged information and what was originally approved. From there, I would just start looking for more records. I think it's interesting that he remained in New York and received compensation for his Revolutionary War service. So again, contact DAR, find out what's going on.
Trying to pick some fast questions because we got very very little time.
Okay, I have one. I'm
Go for it.
very fascinated by this. Would a marriage between a stepbrother and stepsister in the 1870s be considered nothing unusual during that time period, or would it have been frowned upon as incest taboo, even though the husband and wife were not blood relatives and not raised together until teen years? I ask because I'm 99% sure that my great-great-grandparents were steps, but there's some records that make me wonder, like stepfather's will mentions his stepdaughter Emma and her husband Adolf, but yet he doesn't say that Adolf is also his son. So maybe because he was already mentioning him alone at the beginning of the will. So taboo or not in the 1870s.
Depends on where we're talking about, like what area of the country. And also it depends on how religious they were, because like if they're more evangelical, then it might be a little more ick, but not necessarily considered taboo. Not
No,
really.
and that's the thing. They weren't raised together.
Yeah.
So honestly, most people probably would have looked at it like, oh, maybe a little weird that they got to live together before they got married, but that's about it.
It would be more scandalous of like, oh, they lived together before they got married. Maybe they like did some things before they got married, but like that would be about it.
Yeah.
So the last question that I think we're gonna do, unless you have more to say on this subject. No, okay. The
We're
last
good.
question we're gonna do is somebody had asked, are any of our books digitized? So I'm gonna share my screen. The answer is many of our books are digitized. So we have a partnership with both Internet Archive and Family Search. So they have scanning stations in our basement. One of the easier ways to find some of those digitized books for those two partnerships are on our homepage, so genealogycenter.org. If you click this light blue Family History Research, Family History Archives button, there's a link directly to Internet Archive and Family Search. Now, we also digitize family histories that people generously donate to us. If you go to the red Our Resources button back on our homepage, and then scroll down to Family Resources. If you were to say pick a surname, Allison, you want to give me an example?
I'll go to the Accord, that second one.
Oh,
I always like to do that with the bike and the tree.
oh, that's interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, so, and also, you guys, if y'all have family histories like this you'd like to send us, we would love to add them. Also, they are searchable. I see
And
somebody saying that contributing a family history to us might be on her bucket list.
yay.
Yes, yes, send those to us. We would love to have them.
Also, I keep reading your guys' questions and I wish we had time to get to all of them because there's so many fascinating ones. And please, please, please reach out to us. We want to help.
As Allison said, send us an email for those questions. And if you'd like a copy of the chat, send us an email asking for that as well. All right, so we're about out of time. So thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. See ya.
Bye.